Thank you all again for being here. Vice-Chancellor, Foreign Minister, Treasurer, Attorney-General, Shadow Minister for Defence, other parliamentarians, Chief of the Defence Force, leaders of the national security community. I could go on, but it's a really extraordinary roll call here tonight. And of course, members of the Diplomatic Corps as well. Thank you so much, and distinguished guests. It's a great privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. Before I do, I'll echo the acknowledgements of country that we've heard today throughout our conference, and of course, a wonderful welcome to country that we received at the beginning of the day. Our keynote speaker really needs no introduction. The Foreign Minister, Senator Penny Wong, is no stranger to the National Security College. She's no stranger to the audience here. And before I invite her to the lectern, I just note that for many of us, casting our minds back, I think, to November 2021, the Minister entrusted the National Security College with what I consider to have been a headland speech on statecraft. It was on foreign policy, but it was on a much broader array of levers of national power in dealing with the challenges of the world, the challenges of the region. We're very appreciative we were entrusted with that speech, Minister, and as I understand it, that really set the scene for policy when you came into government, when the Albanese government was elected in May 2022. A lot has happened since then, but many of the challenges that were identified at that time have clearly sustained or even intensified, even as Australia has managed to work its way through some of them. But the world is what it is. The world is showing that sense of really great strategic uncertainty and disruption that I'm sure we'll hear more about. We've heard a lot about at the conference today. Minister, today we held the first day of the Securing Our Future conference, and as we've been discussing, it was a very rich feast. I think a very rich feast of ideas, a contest of ideas. We had a wonderful beginning of the day with the Canberra Children's Choir singing the national anthem, but that was the only harmony that we had all day, I hope, because as the Vice-Chancellor's pointed out, the point is not to achieve some kind of artificial consensus. The point is really to develop a dialogue of ideas in the interests of the nation and in the interests of a secure world as well. So we're looking forward immensely to your remarks, Minister. And as I said, I don't think I need to introduce you in detail by your biography, but I think that your career has really been, if I can say, something of folklore in Australian politics and Australian policy. I have many colleagues and staff who study your career intensely, and I know are really pleased that you're here tonight. So please let me invite the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Penny Wong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rory, for your introduction and for not doing the CV. To Genevieve Bell for hosting us, to our MC and to all who put this together, thank you for the opportunity to be with you. I also acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples of the Canberra region, and I pay my respect to elders past and present. I acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues who are here, Treasurer Jim Chalmers, Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus, Shadow Defence Minister Andrew Hastie. I also acknowledge the senior public servants who are here, particularly the Secretary of my department, Jan Adams, who I didn't know was going to be here, but she is. And members of the Defence Force, particularly the CDF, and I thank all of you for your service. Hello to the Diplomatic Corps, members of the Diplomatic Corps who are here. Thank you very much for gracing me with your presence. Well, we're coming to the end of our second year in government, and tonight I want to take account of these first 2 years, where we started and where we are now. But mostly I'd like to give you my perspective on the challenges we face and what it will take to secure our future. My starting point has always been who we are, because that is what we are seeking to secure. It's what our foreign policy projects and protects. We are one of the world's great and enduring democracies. Our people have an abiding tradition of respect for the dignity, rights and freedoms of every individual, founded upon the rule of law. A pluralist nation, we welcome different races, religions and views, united by respect for each other's humanity and for each other's right to live in peace. Australia has been connected to the world for thousands of years. First Nations people were this land's first diplomats and traders, and today Australia's connections continue in who we are and in what we do. Connected by our curiosity and boldness through travel, study, business, sport and the arts. Connected by our rich heritage, drawn from the oldest continuing civilization and from more than 300 ancestries, half of us born overseas, or with at least one parent born overseas. This heritage from all reaches of the earth is a national asset. It gives us perspective, wisdom and experience that we now apply in securing our future in the Indo-Pacific. We know our choices can make a difference in the world, and what happens in the world makes a difference to us. We know the costs of war and the value of peace. And we want to maintain peace. And we want a peace that enables Australia and other countries to have the freedom to decide our own futures free of interference, to have the space to agree and to disagree. We want each country, large or small, to operate by the same rules that we have all had a say in shaping. And when disputes inevitably arise, we want them managed according to the rules and by talking and cooperation, not by force or by raw power. This does not happen on its own. We help make it happen. We do this by being active, by exercising agency, by contributing our efforts to the balance of power in our region so that no country dominates and no country is dominated. We do this by responding when we or our neighbours are coerced or have sovereignty threatened. We do this by combining reassurance and deterrence, by working with our friends and partners openly and transparently, so no potential aggressor thinks the pursuit of conflict is worth the risk. And we do this by engaging with others even when we disagree. We do this by making our case everywhere our interests are on the line, so what Australia wants is heard and respected. We do all of this to keep Australia prosperous and secure at home and confident in the world. When we came to office, there were already major challenges that threatened Australia's interests, and the international trends are not going in the right direction. Climate change is leading to more disasters. Extreme weather threatens food and water security with grave implications for global stability. More people are displaced. More conflict risks and costs lives. Long-standing rules are being bent, twisted and broken. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine demonstrates what is at stake in standing up to aggressors. And just last week, we saw Russia end the mandate of the Security Council's panel of experts on the DPRK after 14 years of unanimous support. The DPRK continues its unlawful activities with impunity, conducting illegal arms transfers to Russia and threatening our region, including our friends in the Republic of Korea and Japan. The political, humanitarian and security situation in Myanmar continues to worsen, with far-reaching implications for our region and its people, including the Rohingya. China's vessels are using water cannons and unsafe manoeuvres against Philippine vessels and crew in the South China Sea. Our regional partners are clear about what is at risk. In December, ASEAN foreign ministers spoke about developments that threaten regional peace and security in the maritime sphere. We share their concern over claims and actions inconsistent with international law, particularly the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Australia knows we are not alone in having faced destabilising, provocative and coercive action, including unsafe conduct at air and in the sea. At sea and in the air. Add to this the threat of cyber attacks, interference, economic coercion and disinformation. The existing system of rules and norms is under strain. And as we face evolving threats, the system has not evolved in turn. The inability to reach agreement in so many fora means that a collective approach to counter grey zone threats remains frustratingly out of reach. And altogether, these factors give rise to the most confronting circumstances in our region in decades, with a higher degree of risk that miscalculation could lead to catastrophic conflict. And the costs of conflict are front of mind for all of us today. I've mentioned Ukraine, whose people continue to heroically fight for their homeland against Russia's flagrant breach of the UN Charter. Australia is resolute in our support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And we are all horrified by the conflict in the Middle East. On October 7th, Israel was brutally attacked by Hamas, and the greatest loss of Jewish life in a single day since the Holocaust. Hamas killed 1,200 people, including Australian grandmother Galit Carboni, and continues to hold 134 hostages. Australia remains steadfast in our call for the immediate and unconditional release of the remaining hostages, families of whom I have met both here and in Israel. Any country under attack by Hamas would defend itself. And in defending itself, every country is bound by the same fundamental rules. Israel must comply with international humanitarian law. It must make major and immediate changes to the conduct of its military campaign to protect civilians, journalists, and aid workers. It must comply with the binding orders of the International Court of Justice, including to enable the provision of basic services and humanitarian assistance at scale. 6 months on from October 7, well over 1 million Palestinians in Gaza are at risk of starvation. More than 33,000 Palestinians have been killed, including many thousands of women and children. 196 aid workers have been killed, including Australian Zomi Francom. Hamas is a terrorist organisation. It is proscribed as such in Australia. It has no respect for international law. Democracies seek and accept higher standards. And this is why Australia and so many countries have called on the Netanyahu government to change course, including in respect of a major ground offensive in Rafah. And again, we say, do not go down this path. When President Biden cautions that Mr. Netanyahu is, and I quote, is hurting Israel more than helping. When Senator Schumer expresses concern that Israel cannot hope to succeed as a pariah opposed by the rest of the world, it is in Israel's own interest that the Netanyahu government responds to the demands of the international community. Anyone who considers themselves a friend of Israel should be making that point. In addition to our demand on all parties for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, enabling the release of hostages, the protection of civilians, and safe and unimpeded humanitarian access, we need to build a pathway out of this endless cycle of violence. We need to build the pathway to a peace that is enduring and just. Because the simple truth is that a secure and prosperous future for both Israelis and Palestinians will only come with a two-state solution. Recognition of each other's right to exist. A Palestinian state alongside the State of Israel. We are now 30 years on from the Oslo Accords. 30 years on from the Accords that put Palestinian statehood at the end of a process. And the failure of this approach by all parties over decades, as well as the Netanyahu government's refusal to even engage on the question of a Palestinian state, have caused widespread frustration. So the international community is now considering the question of Palestinian statehood as a way of building momentum towards a two-state solution. As British Foreign Secretary Cameron has said, the UK will look at the issue of recognising a Palestinian state, including at the United Nations. He said this could make this two-state solution irreversible. Now, there are those who always claim recognition is rewarding an enemy. This is wrong. First, because Israel's own security depends on a two-state solution. There is no long-term security for Israel unless it is recognised by the countries of its region. But the normalisation agenda that was being pursued before October 7 cannot proceed without progress on Palestinian statehood. Saudi Arabia has made clear there will be no diplomatic relations with Israel unless an independent Palestinian state is recognised. Second, because there is no role for Hamas in a future Palestinian state. Hamas is a terrorist organisation which has the explicit intent of the destruction of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. And we should acknowledge Hamas rains terror also on the Palestinian people in Gaza. It has long been understood that any future Palestinian state cannot be in a position to threaten Israel's security and will need a reformed Palestinian Authority. Recognising a Palestinian state, that one that can only exist side by side with a secure Israel, doesn't just offer the Palestinian people an opportunity to realise their aspirations, it also strengthens the forces for peace, and it undermines extremism. It undermines Hamas, Iran, and Iran's other destructive proxies in the region. So I say to you, a two-state solution is the only hope of breaking the endless cycle of violence. And that is why we are urging all parties to return to the table, and why we are engaging to support all efforts to advance a political process, including discussions between regional leaders. Our diplomacy and our decisions are focused on helping advance this lasting peace, which is what we've always said we would do. I want to turn now to the challenges here at home. There is a need to acknowledge the real trauma on all sides, to acknowledge each other's humanity and to come together, as peacemakers through history have done. That is also the approach I urge community and political leaders in Australia to embrace. It is disheartening to witness the number of Australians that increasingly struggle to discuss this conflict without condemning their fellow Australian citizens. This imperils our democracy. We have to keep listening to each other. We have to keep respecting each other. But I have heard language demonstrating that people are losing respect for each other's humanity. Blatant anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. I have heard people who claim to represent one perspective diminishing the legitimacy of the other, seeking to intimidate and to blame. It isn't okay to blame anyone in Australia for the actions of Hamas. And it is not okay to blame anyone in Australia for the actions of the Netanyahu government. And it is not okay to excuse egregious acts just because they're done by people whose views you share. We gain nothing by reproducing this conflict here. We gain nothing by talking past each other. We gain nothing by shouting each other down and by insisting on respective absolutes. We are a pluralist country, welcoming different races, religions and views, and what unites us is respect. It is respect for one another and our right to live in peace. But there are too many politicians in this country who are manipulating legitimate and heartfelt community concern for their own ends. The Greens political party is willing to purposely amplify disinformation, exploiting distress in a blatant and cynical play for votes, with no regard for the social disharmony they are feeling. See, this isn't some game. There are real consequences. And at the same time, Mr Dutton reflexively dismisses concern for Palestinians as Hamas sympathising. On this and on his approach to the world, Mr Dutton needs to decide if he wants to be a leader in difficult times or a wrecking ball. Australians know this country needs mature leadership for serious times. So what are we doing? The Albanese government is working to meet the challenges we face in our region and the world with unprecedented coordination and ambition in our statecraft. Because this is the only way to advance Australia's interests in shaping a region that is peaceful, stable and prosperous. A region free of hegemony, a region in balance, a region where countries large and small have the freedom to decide their own futures, where we operate by the same rules and where we have space to agree and to disagree. Securing our region today requires modernising the legacies of Curtin, Whitlam and Evatt, prioritising alliance, region and rules. Starting with the alliance, which has only grown in strength and depth in the last 2 years. The United States is our closest ally, our principal strategic partner, as well as our largest source of foreign investment. We share values and ideals, and our alliance is underpinned by mutual respect for each other's sovereignty and national interests. The Indo-Pacific would not have enjoyed long periods of stability and prosperity without the United States and its security guarantee to the region. As I have said before, American leadership remains indispensable. It is the great builder of alliances and networks, essential for balance in a multipolar region. And I know that this will be the case in the future, as it has been for many decades past, and we will continue to work closely with whoever is elected by the American people as their president. But US leadership does not abrogate our responsibility. We cannot expect the United States to secure our future for us. Which brings me to my next priority, the region in which we live. We take forward the Labor tradition of a defence and foreign policy anchored in Asia and the Pacific. Since day one of this government, we have been investing in our region and our relationships to build collective resilience and sovereignty. This year alone, we have hosted the Indian Ocean Conference in February and the ASEAN-Australia Special Summit in March. Through the Melbourne Declaration, ASEAN and Australia's leaders reaffirmed ASEAN's centrality in fostering peace and enhancing mutual trust amongst countries in the Indo-Pacific region. And we are building shared prosperity with Southeast Asia, including through Australia's Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040. Our Quad partnership with India, Japan and the United States is listening and responding to the priorities of regional partners, respecting the enduring leadership of ASEAN, the Indian Ocean Rim Association and the Pacific Islands Forum. And we are investing more than ever in the Pacific. Guided by the needs of our Pacific partners and the Pacific Island Forum, we are boosting our support for sport, climate finance, policing and maritime cooperation. The Australian Tuvalu-Fallapili Union embodies our approach to partnership. It is the biggest step Australia has taken with a Pacific country since the independence of Papua New Guinea nearly 50 years ago. We have released Australia's first international development policy in almost a decade, and we are rebuilding our development and humanitarian programs. Through these and other investments, we are working to help our partners become more economically resilient, develop critical infrastructure, and provide their own security so they have less need to call on others. We recognise we live in a more contested region, and we have to work harder to be a trusted partner of choice. The opportunity to be the only partner of choice in the Pacific was lost to us over the previous decade. Being a partner of choice relies on being mature and credible. And I would say to you that stabilising our relationship with China has not only helped build our credibility with regional partners, but it has also enabled Australia to speak directly to China's leadership. Our efforts so far have seen impediments lifted on over $19 billion of Australian exports, and we continue to press for outstanding impediments on around $1 billion of exports to be resolved. We are taking forward regular leader-level and ministerial engagement with China. Now, there are some who imply that there is something to be gained in limiting contact with China. The reality is, China is the world's second largest economy, representing 17% of the world's GDP. China's growth story has been a crucial driver of prosperity in Australia, in our region and the world. China's size and weight make it central to global challenges, from climate change to health. And as a great power, China will continue to assert itself in reshaping the region and the world. Advancing our interests requires engagement. And contrary to what some suggest, engagement does not imply concession. It is worrying that large-scale Chinese military operations in the Taiwan Strait have become a routine event. The risk of accident and potential escalation is growing. Australia's long-standing and bipartisan position is to oppose unilateral changes to the status quo. And we continue to call for the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues through dialogue without the threat or use of force or coercion. Some may say this is insufficient in the circumstances. I would invite this very erudite audience to reflect on what the alternatives are. Australia is always working for peace. And for us, our third priority is upholding and strengthening the rules that work to prevent conflict. Since I had the privilege of becoming your Foreign Minister, I have consistently called for open lines of communication between the great powers. And we welcome the resumption of leader-level and military-level dialogue between the United States and China as important steps on the path towards stability that the region has called for. It is also a reminder of the role militaries must play in reassurance as well as deterrence. And the circumstances we face only reinforce the need for militaries to be in contact, and that the need for new preventive architecture and conflict prevention measures has only grown to increase resilience and promote transparency and reassurance. As military capabilities grow, we know that a level of transparency is expected from our region and our partners, just as we expect transparency of others. And this is how the government has sought to engage our partners at every step of the AUKUS agreement with the United States and the United Kingdom. This week we announced that AUKUS partners are considering cooperation with Japan on AUKUS Pillar 2 advanced capability projects. We are also committed to AUKUS meeting the highest nuclear non-proliferation standards. The IAEA Director General Grossi has welcomed our continued openness and transparency, and we look forward to our co-presidency of the IAEA's International Conference on Nuclear Security in Vienna next month. The Albanese government is progressing the proud Labor commitment to a world without nuclear weapons. And just as we carry forward the Labor commitment to international organisations, seeking to reform them for today's challenges, and recognising that many developing countries are inadequately served by too much of the international system. We want everyone to have a voice, because Australia knows that international rules and norms can deter conflict and underpin our security and prosperity. So all of these efforts, the alliance, the region and the rules, have an ultimate goal: to avert conflict, build prosperity and sustain the kind of peace we all want. Our efforts provide reassurance to persuade all countries that their interests are best served by peace and deterrence to ensure that the costs of aggression continue to outweigh the benefits. Now, often security discourses have artificially divided actions to reassure and to deter. And the implication being that the role of diplomacy is exclusively soft persuasion, while the hard edge of the military is our only deterrent. But that thinking limits our potency when we have to maximise all the tools of national power. As recognised in the Defence Strategic Review, credible deterrence requires using all levers of statecraft to create an unacceptably high cost for any potential adversary. Now, the logic of the post-war economic order was to enable development and growth through openness. And today, as then, economic integration provides a critical incentive for peace, as regional economies share the benefits of prosperity. Economic interdependence can, as we know, also be misused for strategic and political ends. And this is one way in which rules play an important role in deterrence, in this case international trade rules, which also create a level playing field. You see, this is why multilateral engagement matters. It's why multilateral engagement in international organisations like the United Nations is a core national interest, too often dismissed by some. These organisations are where nations come together to decide the rules and to defend the peace. And as the saying goes, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Now, I want to make this point about diplomacy, which in these forums and elsewhere builds coalitions, reduces tensions, negotiates agreements and resolves disputes. Diplomacy frames the calculus that each country faces. Diplomacy signals intent, credibility and even red lines. The new concept of national defence underpinning the inaugural National Defence Strategy comprehends that as we seek to maintain peace in our region. Our nation's front line is diplomacy, and our diplomacy is underwritten by our military capability. DPM Richard Marles made this point last week, that deterring conflict in today's environment requires a new approach, one that harnesses all elements of our national power. So here at home, our domestic resilience, our economic strength, and our multicultural democracy, they also raise the costs for those who would seek to coerce us. Indeed, in all of these cases, the levers to deter and reassure are mutually reinforcing. Without credible military capability, the efficacy of diplomacy and economic integration are invariably diminished. And without ever more investment in diplomacy and engagement, the risk of military capabilities being called upon for conflict increases. So as international trends continue in the wrong direction, Australia's coordination of our military, diplomatic, strategic and economic power, our ability to reassure partners and to deter threats becomes ever more important. We all know our region is being reshaped, and Australians know our choices and our actions matter. So we work with partners and friends to shape the region in our interests, contributing to the region's balance of power, so no country dominates and no country is dominated. We seek to be the credible and mature partner we expect other countries to be. And I'll end this contribution tonight where I began. Australians have always been connected to the world. Through this connection, we know what it is about Australia we need to project and what it is we need to protect. A pluralist nation, a nation that is welcoming, respectful, a nation in which we celebrate each other's rights and freedoms. This is the nation whose future we seek to secure. Thank you very much.